The waitress refused VIP service until the millionaire said he came to find his lost family. Rose Parker's day began like any other, a routine shift at Sullivan's Bounty, the chic restaurant she'd called her second home for years. She'd been taught to treat every guest with courtesy and warmth. Yet when a disheveled man strolled in, claiming to be a VIP, she couldn't believe her ears. Ignoring the polished shoes peeking from beneath his faded jeans, she refused him a spot in the exclusive lounge. What she didn't realize was that he wasn't just another overconfident customer. He was a millionaire on a mission to reunite with his long-lost family. Little did Rose know how drastically her life was about to change. Rose Parker's mornings were simple. She'd rise at dawn in her cramped studio apartment on Beacon Street in Boston. Her father, Harold Parker, had been a teacher at Boston Latin School and had always impressed upon Rose the value of hard work. Growing up, she had listened to countless stories of her father's dedication to each of his students, and that sense of duty lingered in her heart. Even though her dream was to become a journalist, someday, finances and circumstance had led her to a different path, at least temporarily. She worked as a waitress at Sullivan's Bounty, a restaurant known for its refined ambiance and upscale clientele. Sullivan's Bounty was perched on the edge of a cobblestone district near the Charles River. Visitors could enjoy a peaceful view of the water while indulging in the restaurant's signature seafood and fine wines. Soft violin music played in the background, mingling with hushed conversations at each table. Impeccably dressed, staff glided across the marble floors, balancing plates of gourmet dishes. It wasn't the sort of place Rose had ever expected to work. She'd always felt more at ease in a cozy cafe or a bustling bookstore. But the pay was decent, especially in tips. And her manager, Marcus, had a knack for scheduling her in ways that gave her time to attend night classes at a local community college. On a normal day, Rose would greet new patrons with an earnest smile. Her warm brown eyes and gentle demeanor made her popular among the regulars, and her ability to remember specific requests, like who needed extra lemon slices and who preferred their coffee, black made her a standout server. Still, Sullivan's Bounty had its share of challenging guests. Some used the restaurant to flaunt wealth, demanding instantaneous service and complaining about the slightest inconvenience. Yet Rose had mastered the art of navigating these personalities, ensuring even the most entitled customers left with a sense of satisfaction. This day, however, felt slightly off from the start. The crisp autumn air carried an undercurrent of tension as Rose walked to the restaurant, her footsteps echoing off the brick walls. She hardly had time to reflect on it before stepping inside and attending to the morning tasks, polishing silverware, aligning linens, and conferring with the head chef on daily specials. The usual bustle enveloped her, but beneath that hum there was an unspoken expectation, like something monumental was going to break the routine. Just before the lunch rush, the hostess stand was attended by a new hire. Sarah, an overly eager and somewhat anxious young woman who had joined only a week earlier. Sarah was polite, but lacked the composure that came from experience. Rose noticed her frequent glances at the front door, as though anticipating an important arrival. Indeed, an anticipated VIP was on the reservation list that day, a man known as Mr. Redwood. He had booked the exclusive Riverview lounge that was typically reserved for high-profile guests, the type who appear in philanthropic circles or grace the pages of Forbes. The staff had been briefed to expect him, but no one knew what he looked like. There was an initial wave of excitement. Rumor had it that Redwood was a millionaire with philanthropic ties, possibly even connected to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or other global charities. One of the managers had mentioned Redwood's name alongside references to generous donations and massive tips. Everyone was on edge anticipating this distinguished guest's arrival, when a man in casual attire walked in alone, with his hair slightly tousled, wearing faded jeans and a well-worn leather jacket. No one gave him a second glance. After all, the patrons who visited Sullivan's Bounty usually arrived in polished suits or elegant dresses. Even so, Rose greeted him politely. She assumed he was just stopping by for a quick lunch, especially since the hour was early, and the lounge wasn't typically opened until the VIP arrived. But as soon as he asked for a table in the private lounge, Rose felt a red flag raise in her mind. She responded, "I'm sorry, sir. The lounge is reserved for private events today." Calmly, the man explained, "I have a reservation under Redwood." Sarah, overhearing this from the hostess, Stan frantically typed into the reservation system. She must have noticed the name Redwood. Her mouth fell open slightly as she looked up. Rose caught the expression on Sarah's face, but she hesitated. This man didn't look anything like the typical VIP. Could this truly be the Redwood they had all been anticipating? Something about him, his slightly hesitant posture, the lines of weariness around his eyes, suggested a man burdened with more than just casual business, yet she found it hard to reconcile this down-to-earth figure with the glamorous image they had constructed in their minds. Politely, Rose repeated the lounge policy. The man lifted an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He then said softly, "I had hoped to speak with the manager, or perhaps the owner. I'm here to find someone who might be working or might come here. It's personal." Marcus, the manager, was busy at the back dealing with an inventory issue. Pressed for time and uncertain if the man's claim was valid, Rose insisted the lounge was off-limits and offered him a table in the main dining area. The man quietly complied, though a hint of disappointment flickered in his eyes. Something about this moment stuck with Rose. She assumed that if he really were the Redwood in question, he would have asserted himself more. He would have demanded the lounge he paid for, flashed his credentials, maybe even dropped references to his philanthropic or business connections. But this man did none of that. He took the main dining seat with a polite nod. That was just the beginning of a day that would unravel secrets, reveal hidden connections, and set two lives on a collision course neither Rose nor the mysterious man could have ever predicted. Rose guided the man to a table near the window that overlooked the bustling street. Usually, VIPs preferred the river view. She decided almost impulsively to seat him where he might catch some light and maybe feel more comfortable. The restaurant was still quiet, a calm before the imminent lunch storm. She handed him a menu and introduced herself. "I'm Rose, and I'll be your server today. Our specials include lobster bisque seared scallops with a lemon beurre blanc and a grilled salmon with thyme-seasoned vegetables. Can I start you off with a beverage?" His blue eyes were intense, observing her carefully before he spoke. "I'll just have a glass of water for now," he said, voice measured and a moment to look at the menu. There was a slight pause as he weighed his words. "Thank you for taking the time," he added quietly. Rose offered a practiced smile. "Certainly." She turned on her heel, focusing on the tasks ahead. Yet her mind was already replaying the brief interaction. A million questions raced through her head. Was he truly Redwood? Why would a millionaire with an exclusive reservation show up dressed so humbly with such a subdued manner? Granted, it wasn't unheard of for wealthy people to dress down, but something about his entire demeanor was contradictory to the flamboyant stereotypes she'd encountered. In the kitchen, Rose filled a glass with ice-cold water. She overheard Sarah whispering to another server, "I swear I saw Redwood's name on the screen. Could that be him?" The other server shrugged, unconvinced. Rose decided to keep her suspicions quiet for now. It didn't matter. She had treated him with the standard courtesy, and not turned him away, even if she had refused him the lounge. Her duties were clear. Serve the man, do her job. Mystery or not, she had orders piling up a manager to appease and a bustling lunch crowd on the way. Returning to the man's table, she set down the water. "Have you decided?" He glanced up from the menu, giving a courteous nod. "I'll have the lobster bisque, and please some bread, if possible." "Of course," Rose replied, writing it down. "Would you like anything else?" He hesitated before replying. "That'll be all for now." She walked away, feeling a twinge of guilt. If he really was Redwood, she might have been more accommodating. The restaurant prided itself on giving VIPs exceptional treatment, like complimentary amuse-bouche or immediate manager introductions. But then again, he hadn't proven anything. The Redwood on the reservation was rumored to be a wealthy philanthropist, traveling from the West Coast, possibly Seattle, to meet with associates in Boston. This man offered no explanation, no business card, nothing but a subdued presence. Her logic was telling her there was a mismatch, yet the guilt was there, nibbling at the edges of her mind. When the order was ready, Rose carried the bowl of lobster bisque out along with a basket of freshly baked sourdough bread. She arranged them gently on the table. "Enjoy your meal," she said sincerely. "Thank you," he replied, picking up his spoon. He ate slowly, savoring each bite with a thoughtful expression. Now and then he glanced around the restaurant, observing the decor, the staff, and the layout. His gaze eventually settled on a photo mounted on a nearby wall, a framed black and white picture of the restaurant's founder shaking hands with a local Bostonian celebrity, former mayor Thomas Menino. The photograph was iconic, a reminder of the venue's long-standing history in the city. The man stared at it, as though searching for something beyond the image, perhaps some clue hidden within it. Rose found herself lingering at the perimeter of his table, curious. She caught him looking from the photo to her, as if trying to connect the dots. Confused, she forced herself to move on to her other tasks. Yet every now and then, her gaze drifted toward him. Over the next half hour, as more guests trickled in, Rose maintained her professional composure, juggling orders, refilling glasses, and delivering food with customary efficiency. But something didn't feel normal anymore. She overheard a whispered conversation between Marcus and Sarah at the front. Marcus was scanning the reservation list, muttering, "He was supposed to be here by now. That Redwood guy, we can't keep the lounge closed forever." Sarah looked flustered. "I know, but nobody who looks like Redwood has come in." Rose paused, half listening. She sighed, feeling her pulse quicken. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe the man truly was Redwood, and she had sent him to a public table like a normal walk-in. Within minutes, the VIP lounge remained conspicuously empty, and the staff began to speculate that Redwood was either a no-show or running late. Some guessed he might have cancelled, others joked he must have found a better venue. The entire time, Rose caught the man's eye from across the dining room. There was a calm in his posture as he sipped water and meticulously dipped bread into the bisque. He didn't make a fuss about slow service or ask to speak with a manager, behaviors typical of someone outraged that he'd been denied the perks he was due. If he was Redwood, he was surprisingly patient. Then, near the end of his meal, he motioned Rose over. "Can I settle my bill?" he asked. "Of course." She produced the check, still feeling uneasy. "Any dessert or coffee?" He must have read the conflict in her expression, because he attempted a small smile. "Not today, thanks." He settled his tab with a black credit card that bore the initials E.R. Rose's Heart, almost skipped a beat when she saw the name on the card, Ethan Redwood. She glanced up, her eyes wide. He merely nodded in confirmation, as if to say, "Yes, that's me." Her cheeks flushed. She took the card, silently processed it, and returned, forcing herself to remain professional. She placed the receipt and pen on the table, quietly saying, "Thank you, Mr. Redwood." The new knowledge weighed heavily. She expected a rebuke for having refused him the VIP lounge. She expected him to complain to Marcus. She even braced for the possibility of him storming out angrily. But Ethan Redwood just gave a casual shrug. "It's all right," he said in a measured tone. "I appreciate the good food." Then with a slight frown, he added, "I'm here in Boston for more important matters than a lounge. Perhaps I'll see you again soon." A jolt of curiosity rippled through Rose. She wanted to ask him about those more important matters, but her professionalism told her not to pry. She watched in astonishment as Ethan Redwood stood, collected his jacket, and calmly departed. In his wake, he left a generous tip, something that made her feel both grateful and slightly guilty. She realized with a pang that she had misjudged him. He had come here expecting to use the lounge, had every right to be offended by the oversight. Yet he left, with quiet dignity, and a tip that practically guaranteed Rose's rent for the month that should have been the end of it. But as Rose cleared the table, she noticed a small slip of paper underneath the bread basket. It had a single handwritten note. "If you hear from a woman named Marianne Parker, call me beneath." It was a phone number. The shock hit her like a thunderbolt. Marianne Parker was her mother's name. Speechless Rose clutched the slip of paper in trembling fingers. Her mother, Marianne Parker, had passed away 2 years ago. She'd been a kind, steadfast woman who, after divorcing Harold Parker, raised Rose single-handedly for several years. Their bond had been unbreakable, and her death from a sudden illness left a crater in Rose's life. Why then would Ethan Redwood, an apparent millionaire from the West Coast, be asking about Marianne Parker? Now Rose's mind whirled with questions. Was Ethan Redwood connected to her family's past? Did he know her mother? The possibility was jarring. It felt inconceivable that in all of Boston, Redwood would leave a cryptic note referencing her mother. Perhaps there was another Marianne Parker out there. Boston was large and Parker was a common surname, but the note felt personal, almost directed. Rose's heart pounded as she tried to rationalize. It could be an uncanny coincidence. Still, she couldn't shake the eerie sense that Redwood's presence at Sullivan's Bounty was more than just a casual drop-in or even a normal VIP visit. Marcus's voice abruptly cut through her haze. "Rose, are you all right?" She hurriedly stuffed the note into her apron pocket, schooling her expression. "Yes, I'm fine." She managed her voice, wavering. She forced a tight-lipped smile. "Just clearing the table." Marcus frowned. "You look pale. Did something happen with that customer?" Rose hesitated. "No, I'm just feeling a bit lightheaded. Might be the kitchen heat." She wasn't ready to share the note, especially given the bizarre circumstances. If Redwood was searching for Marianne Parker, Rose needed time to piece this together before telling her manager or anyone else. Marcus nodded, not fully convinced. "All right. Why don't you take a quick break? We're heading into the lunch rush, but if you need a moment, go ahead." Thankful for the brief reprieve, Rose slipped away to the staff restroom. With shaking hands, she retrieved the note from her pocket and read it again. "If you hear from a woman named Marianne Parker, call me below," was Ethan Redwood's phone number, scrawled in neat handwriting. She stared at the words for several seconds. Why would Redwood assume she'd hear from Marianne? For a moment, Rose wondered if Redwood was misguided, thinking Marianne was alive. The recollection of her mother's last days in the hospital pained her. She could still feel the warmth of her mother's frail hand in hers, the final whispered goodbyes. No matter how improbable Redwood's quest seemed, it struck her with fierce emotion. Was Redwood searching for someone else, another Marianne Parker? Or was he from a part of her mother's past that Rose had never known about? She remembered her mother mentioning on rare occasion an old acquaintance named Ethan. But that had been decades ago, back when Marianne had first moved to Boston from upstate New York. But Redwood looked like he was in his mid-30s, around Rose's age. That would be too young for him to have known her mother back then. Unless... The door of the restroom opened, and Sarah stepped in, snapping Rose out of her swirling thoughts. Quickly, Rose tucked the note away. Sarah washed her hands, studying Rose's reflection in the mirror. "You sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Rose forced a reassuring tone. "I'm fine. Probably just feeling dizzy." Sarah shrugged. "It's your turn to take table 7. They've just arrived." Then she left, sighing. Rose followed her out, forcing her focus back on work. Yet the note was a burning secret in her pocket. Throughout the lunch rush, she methodically took orders delivered, food smiled politely, and made small talk with patrons. But her mind kept drifting back to Redwood's cryptic message. Later in the afternoon, when the rush subsided and the staff started to prepare for the dinner shift, Rose found a quiet corner near the supply closet. She fished out her phone and considered calling Redwood. A tremor of nerves fluttered through her stomach. What would she even say? "Hello. I found your note. I'm Marianne Parker's daughter. She passed away 2 years ago. Why are you looking for her?" The conversation seemed fraught with possibilities, some that Rose wasn't sure she was ready to confront. Ultimately, fear of the unknown made her hesitate. She decided to wait, gather her thoughts, and maybe talk to her father, Harold Parker. He would know if there was any distant relative or hidden secret that could explain Redwood's search for Marianne Parker. But reaching Harold wasn't easy, as he spent long afternoons at the retirement center library volunteering. His phone was often off. Rose resolved to visit him after her shift ended. In the meantime, she tucked Redwood's note deep into her wallet. She continued her day with mechanical efficiency, taking orders, filling glasses, plastering on a polite smile for the dinner crowd. Yet underneath, she felt her world slowly tilting, as if Redwood's arrival had triggered a shift in her fate. Nighttime fell, casting long shadows across the cobbled streets of Boston. By the time Rose finished her shift, Sullivan's Bounty was winding down. Lights dimmed, and the final patrons lingered over after-dinner coffee. Rose changed out of her uniform, pulling on a cardigan to ward off the chilly autumn air. She said her goodbyes to the remaining staff and walked to her old beat-up sedan, parked a few blocks away. The city lights glimmered off the Charles River, reflecting a calm scene that contrasted with the storm of thoughts in Rose's head. As she started her car, her phone buzzed. Checking the screen, she saw a missed call from her father. She tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Anxiety gnawed at her. They typically spoke every other day, usually about mundane things like grocery sales or updates on her father's volunteering, but the timing made her uneasy. She had planned to drop by in person at the retirement center the next morning, but something spurred her to go right away. She drove across town, taking side streets to avoid the late-night traffic near Fenway, her hands occasionally tensing on the steering wheel. The note from Redwood was like a spark in her mind, relentless and burning. She needed answers, and she hoped Harold Parker could provide them. As she pulled up to the retirement center, she spotted her father's modest sedan in the visitor parking area. A swirl of relief and confusion washed over her. He wouldn't normally be there this late. Inside the lobby, the overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Rose found her father in the recreation room, hunched over a vintage record player, flipping through old vinyls with mild fascination. He looked up as soon as she walked in. His gentle face lit up with a small smile. "Rose, what brings you here so late?" she sighed, walking closer. "You tried calling me, right? I saw a missed call." Harold nodded. "Yes. I wanted to ask if you'd be able to stop by tomorrow. I found an old chest full of documents that belonged to your mother. I thought you might want to see them before I decide what to do with them." He paused, noticing the tension in her eyes. "But you're here now. Everything okay?" Rose took a seat next to him, scanning the quiet recreation room. Only a caretaker was present, nodding politely before exiting. She inhaled, bracing herself. Dad did. Mum ever mentioned someone named Ethan Redwood? Harold's eyes flickered with momentary confusion, or possibly recognition. Redwood. Redwood. The name doesn't ring a bell immediately. Why, she explained the day's events, detailing how a man named Ethan Redwood came into the restaurant, how he was apparently a VIP, but didn't look the part, and especially the note he left about Marianne Parker. Harold listened intently, eyebrows knitting together. When she finished, he said quietly, "Your mother never spoke of an Ethan Redwood that I can recall." That doesn't mean he didn't exist, though. Marianne's early life before we met wasn't something she dwelled on. She came from upstate New York, from a family that was, well, not particularly close. She lost touch with them after we got married. There's a chance Redwood could be connected to them, or maybe Redwood is just mistaken. Rose nodded slowly, mind churning. "So you have no idea who he is?" Harold shook his head. "No, but maybe something in your mother's old documents could shed light." He pointed to a cardboard box sitting nearby. It looked old and dusty, filled to the brim with papers and keepsakes. I found it while clearing the attic. If Redwood was significant, there might be letters or photographs. Eager yet uneasy, Rose picked up the box and carried it over to a table. Together they began sifting through the contents. Among them were old family photos, grainy snapshots of Marianne as a teenager, diaries from her high school years, letters from acquaintances. An hour passed, and they found nothing referencing Redwood. But then Rose came upon a sealed envelope addressed to Marianne Parker in neat calligraphy. The return address read, West Shore Orphanage, Seattle, Washington. Rose's heart pounded. She had never heard of Marianne living in Seattle, let alone having any connection to an orphanage. She opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated nearly 30 years ago. It read in part, "We regret to inform you that we have been unable to locate the child's biological parents. As you requested, we have kept your identity confidential. But if there is a change in circumstances, please let us know if you wish to claim guardianship. Sincerely, West Shore Orphanage Administration." The letter left her reeling. She passed it to Harold, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" Rose whispered. "Child biological parents. Did she have another child?" Harold blinked in disbelief. "Not that I ever knew of. We married shortly after college. If she had a child before we met, she never told me." He paused, forcing back the tremor in his voice. Could Redwood be connected to that child? An overwhelming flood of emotions crashed into Rose. If her mother had a secret child, that child would be her half-sibling. And Redwood's quiet presence, his note, his searching gaze, it all started to make a twisted kind of sense. Maybe Redwood was that child, or perhaps Redwood was searching for the child on Marianne's behalf, unaware that Marianne had passed away. The questions were endless. She reread the letter. It was vague, but hinted that Marianne had contacted the orphanage for some reason and wanted confidentiality. The letter's date indicated it was just before Rose was born. The timeline was murky. Rose felt dizzy, longing for her mother's presence to explain everything. But Marianne was gone, and the puzzle now lay in Rose's hands. Harold touched her shoulder gently. "This is a lot to take in. Let's not jump to conclusions. Redwood might be after something else, or it might be a complete coincidence. But we can't deny this letter exists. And Redwood did mention your mother's name." Rose looked up at her father, tears pricking her eyes. "What do I do, Dad?" He exhaled slowly. "Sleep on it. Decide if you want to call Redwood. Whether or not he's connected to this child, he might have answers, or it might open a chapter your mother wanted to keep closed. You have to be sure you're ready for that." Staring down at the faded letter, Rose felt the weight of destiny pressing in. Everything seemed like a harbinger of major changes. She realized she might have discovered a side of her mother's history that could alter her understanding of their entire family. And Ethan Redwood, the millionaire VIP, might be the key to it all. Sleep eluded Rose that night. She lay in bed, rereading Redwood's note in her mind, recalling the unspoken sorrow etched on his face as he observed the restaurant's decor. The next morning, after a fitful doze, she mustered the courage to call the number Redwood had left. Her heart hammered with every ring, and she nearly hung up out of panic. On the fifth ring, a hoarse voice answered. "Hello, Ethan." Redwood speaking. Rose's mouth went dry. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she forced herself to find words. "Mr. Redwood, this is Rose. Parker, the waitress from Sullivan's Bounty." She swallowed hard. "You left a note for me. About Marianne Parker." There was a silence on the other end, heavy with emotion. Finally, Redwood spoke quietly. "Yes, thank you for calling." Rose waited, but he said nothing else. She gathered her courage. I wanted to ask why you're searching for her." Another pause. Then Redwood's voice softened. "I owe her a debt of sorts. She was once a very dear friend. I came to Boston because I heard she might be here." Rose's eyes welled with tears at the word friend, the question of Redwood's true identity swirling in her mind. "How did you?" She paused, fighting to keep her voice steady. "How did you know her?" He exhaled. "It's complicated, but I can explain if we meet. Are you available sometime soon?" Rose hesitated, conflicting emotions twisting inside. She realized that learning Redwood's truth might open a portal to secrets best left buried, or it could offer healing and closure to her mother's untold story. She was also aware Redwood didn't yet know Marianne was deceased. She decided she owed him that truth, and she needed to hear his side. "I have some time later today," she said. "We can meet somewhere public, if that's all right," Redwood agreed. They settled on a cozy cafe near the Boston Public Garden, neutral territory where they could talk. Rose hung up and let out a shaky breath, adrenaline surging through her. She looked at herself in the mirror, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans hair, loosely tied back. This was hardly a scenario she'd ever envisioned. She was about to confront a mysterious man connected to her mother's past, who might be her half-brother, or might be embroiled in an even deeper puzzle. When she arrived at the cafe, Redwood was already seated at an outdoor table wearing a neatly pressed navy shirt and dark trousers, a stark contrast to his previous casual look. Despite this more polished appearance, he still radiated a certain humility. Standing up when he saw her, Redwood offered a friendly nod. Rose he greeted. She sat down, trying to calm the tremor in her voice. "Mr. Redwood," he waved away the formality. Please just call me Ethan." Rose fiddled with the cafe's menu, feeling the swirl of coffee aromas around them. It was a bright morning, with the sun reflecting off the park's greenery. Finally she spoke. "Before we start, I need to tell you something important. My mother, Marianne. Parker passed away 2 years ago." Ethan's face went pale, his jaw tightening. He closed his eyes for a moment, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I didn't know," he whispered. When he opened his eyes, tears glistened. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Rose blinked back her own tears, nodding thank you. "But I need to understand why you came looking for her." Ethan took a measured breath, as though collecting his thoughts. "Marianne Parker was... I believe she was the only link to my biological family. I grew up in Seattle at West Shore Orphanage. My records are sealed, but I managed to piece together a few clues. I discovered that a Marianne Parker had visited the orphanage around the time I was born. She was searching for someone, or maybe she was giving someone up. The records were vague, but her name kept appearing. Rose's pulse hammered. This matched the letter she'd found. She summoned her composure and said quietly, "I found a letter at my father's place, from that orphanage. It mentioned a child." Ethan's eyes widened, hope flickering across his face. "Can you tell me more?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. The memory of her father's warning about opening painful chapters weighed on her. Finally, she took a leap of faith. The letter didn't specify a name or the child's fate, but it implied my mother had some connection to a baby. The letter was dated about 30 years ago, around the time you would have been born. Emotions flared in Ethan's eyes, a mixture of longing and fear. "I suspect I am that child. I've spent years trying to figure out why I was left at West Shore, and who might have had custody or visitation. The staff claimed a woman named Marianne once inquired, but then she vanished from their records. I tracked her name to Boston, but all I could find was an old address and a rumor that she worked in or around Sullivan's Bounty. At some point, the revelation sliced through Rose. She tried to think back, but she couldn't recall any mention of her mother working at Sullivan's Bounty. Marianne had worked as a paralegal, a teacher's assistant, and occasionally in real estate, but never anything to do with the restaurant industry to Rose's knowledge. It could be that Redwood's leads were tenuous, culminating in the mistaken assumption that Marianne was linked to Sullivan's Bounty. Specifically, maybe Redwood had found threads of rumor or incomplete data. Yet the orphanage letter was undeniably real. I started at Sullivan's Bounty a few years ago. Rose explained, "I never heard of my mother having any ties there, but maybe she visited the restaurant often before I was hired." She paused, testing the waters. "If you are that child, that means you're my half-brother, or at least you might be." Ethan gave a trembling nod, heartbreak and excitement melding in his eyes. "I understand how crazy this might sound, but I'm not here to disrupt your life. I promise you that I needed to know who I am, who my mother was. I don't even know if Marianne was my birth mother or a relative trying to help, but she's the only name I have." Rose's mind spun the gravity of the revelation. Overwhelming, she recognized Ethan's sincerity. This wasn't a scheme for money. He was a millionaire after all, or so rumor had it, and he wasn't brandishing threats or manipulative demands. Instead, he seemed like a vulnerable soul desperate to solve the puzzle of his origin. She swallowed her own confusion and asked, "How did you end up so wealthy?" Ethan managed a sad smile. "I was adopted by a wealthy couple in Seattle. They passed away a few years ago. Leaving me their estate, I invested, started a tech business. and it grew beyond anything I'd imagined. But no amount of success can fill the hole of not knowing where you came from, why you were given up. Money wasn't enough. I had to find out about my biological family. Rose nodded slowly. She understood the pain behind his words. She herself had grown up questioning her mother about their extended family, only to receive vague answers. Marianne had always been private about her own origins. Perhaps now, Rose had an inkling why the pair fell silent. The hum of the cafe enveloping them. People chatted coffee machines, word and a light breeze rustled the leaves in the park. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice trembling with hope. "If you'll let me, I'd like to work with you to figure this out. Even if we discover Marianne was just a relative or a friend. I need to know. I'll pay for whatever resources or investigations are needed. I just need the truth." Something in Rose stirred with empathy. She saw the lost child behind Ethan's poised demeanor. She also realized that she needed answers as badly as he did for her own sense of identity, and for the love she bore her mother. "I have some of her documents," she said quietly. "Letters, journals, photographs. There might be more clues." She inhaled, forging a tentative path. "We can look through them together. See what we find. If you are my half-brother, I want to know too, but I need time to process this." Ethan nodded, relief flooding his features. "Thank you. And I'm sorry to bring all this upheaval. It's just, I've come too far to turn back now." Rose forced a small smile. "Then we'll figure it out together." They exchanged information, deciding to meet in a few days at Rose's father's place to examine Marianne's documents. As they parted ways, Rose felt like she'd stepped into a parallel world, a place where a mysterious millionaire, might be her brother, and her mother's carefully guarded past was unraveling piece by piece. She was scared but also resolute. Sometimes destiny comes knocking in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes you have to let it in. The days that followed were a blur of emotional highs and lows. Rose confided in her father Harold about Ethan's potential connection to Marianne's hidden child, although Harold was visibly shaken, realizing his late wife might have had significant secrets. He supported Rose's decision to unravel the truth. They agreed to let Ethan see the box of Marianne's documents. If he could handle it respectfully, perhaps they would find answers. Ethan arrived one sunny afternoon, wearing a humble sweater and dark slacks. Gone was the aloof stranger in worn jeans or the refined millionaire aura. In his stead stood a man with a gentle smile and a readiness to work. He had even brought fresh pastries for everyone, an unexpected gesture that warmed Rose's heart. Harold greeted Ethan politely, though a degree of caution lingered in his eyes. They all sat in the living room of Harold's modest suburban home, the box of Marianne's belongings set on the coffee table. Rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It felt oddly sacred, as though they were about to unearth relics of an ancient past. "This is everything we have," Harold explained, gently lifting the box's lid. "We've already skimmed some of it, but there's a lot we haven't yet gone through." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. Rose could see the tension in his shoulders, the hope in his eyes. He began sifting through photographs, snapshots of Marianne in her 20s, smiling shyly at what looked like a garden party, candid shots with baby Rose in her arms, their eyes mirroring each other's warmth. Each image painted a portrait of love and simplicity. Ethan gazed at them with a quiet reverence, as though searching for a connection or clue. Harold carefully unwrapped a small notebook, bound in faded blue leather. "Marianne's journal," he murmured. "I've never read it." She was quite private about her diary entries. Rose hesitated, feeling the moral weight of reading her mother's private thoughts. But the stakes were high. They might hold the key to Ethan's origins. "We'll handle it gently," she promised her father. She glanced at Ethan for his reaction. "I understand this is sensitive," Ethan said softly. "I don't want to invade Marianne's privacy, but if there's anything that can guide us—" Harold nodded, placing the journal in Rose's hands. She opened it slowly, flipping through pages of neat cursive. Some entries were mundane notes about errands, birthdays, or her job. Others hinted at deeper feelings, especially around the time Marianne was pregnant with Rose. Then, near the back of the journal, Rose found an entry dated about 9 months before her own birth. "I can't stop thinking about the baby I left behind, the one I wasn't strong enough to keep. I pray he's safe, wherever he is. I wish I had the means to care for him, but I'm alone now. Harold doesn't know. I fear losing him if he finds out. Once I marry Harold, maybe I can come clean. But it's too soon, too risky. I've written to West Shore, orphanage again. But no response yet. I want to know how my little boy is doing." Rose's eyes blurred with tears as she read the passage aloud. She looked up, seeing the stunned expression on Harold's face. Ethan sat motionless, tears streaming down his cheeks. The lines were clear. Now, Marianne had given birth to a boy before marrying Harold, a child she couldn't support at the time. That child was very likely Ethan Redwood. No one spoke for a long moment. A hush enveloped the room, with only the sound of a distant lawnmower breaking the stillness. Finally, Harold broke the silence, voice shaking. I never knew. She must have been so afraid." Ethan inhaled tears, still glistening in his eyes. "So it's real. She was my birth mother." His voice trembled with equal parts sorrow and elation. "I spent years imagining what she was like, why she gave me up. Now I know." Rose reached over, gently placing her hand on Ethan's. They shared a solemn gaze, acknowledging the tidal wave of emotion flooding through them. In that moment, Rose felt a bond forming with the man she had only recently met, but who was in the most literal sense her brother. Harold, visibly overwhelmed, pressed his lips together. "I wish I could have helped." If I'd known, maybe Ethan shook his head, voice tight. "It's not your fault. She did what she had to do." They continued exploring Marianne's journal, piece by piece. Many entries detailed the emotional turmoil she endured, the heartbreak of leaving her child at the orphanage, her fear of being judged, and her desire to build a stable home with Harold once they were married. She'd intended to reveal the truth someday, but life's circumstances, and probably her own shame, made her keep the secret buried. The rest of the afternoon was spent reminiscing. Harold recounted stories of Marianne's kindness, her sharp wit, and her dedication to teaching children. Rose shared childhood anecdotes, holiday dinners, silly family jokes, afternoons spent baking cookies. Ethan listened with rapt attention, absorbing every detail, like a starving man finally allowed to eat. Even though tears flowed freely, a sense of warmth wrapped around them. They were forging new connections in the wake of a secret that had spanned decades. As the sun dipped low, casting orange hues across the living room, Ethan cleared his throat. "I know I can't go back in time to be part of this family the way it could have been, but I'd like to stay connected now, if you'll have me. I'm not here to replace anything. I just want to know you." Rose wiped her eyes, a gentle smile forming. "I'd like that. Your family, after all." Harold nodded, though his expression remained tinged with sadness. "Marianne would be proud to see this. I'm sure she'd have wanted you in her life. I just wish she'd told me. We would have raised you together." Ethan squeezed Harold's hand gratefully. "Thank you, this means more than I can ever say." In that moment of unity, they decided to honor Marianne's memory by forging ahead as siblings, as family. The weight of hidden truths began lifting, replaced by a fragile hope. But little did they know, fate had more twists in store, obstacles that would threaten to undo their newfound bond, and revelations that would test their resolve to stay united. Word spread discreetly among the staff at Sullivan's Bounty that Ethan Redwood was no ordinary customer, and that the restaurant manager had missed the chance to properly accommodate him. Marcus, upon realizing Redwood was indeed the VIP on the reservation list, grew panicked. The owners had chastised him for the mishap, and the tension trickled down through the ranks. The staff began whispering that Redwood was a tech mogul with connections across high society. Some worried Redwood would tarnish Sullivan's Bounty's reputation after the snub. But Redwood continued to visit discreetly, often slipping in to meet Rose after her shift or to dine quietly. He never showed any bitterness, and if anything, his presence increased the restaurant's intrigue. Regular patrons gossiped, speculating about Redwood's reason for returning so often. Unbeknownst to them, Redwood and Rose were forging a sibling bond, filling in each other's histories, and forging an unlikely alliance. One evening, as Rose was finishing a late shift, Redwood arrived for a quiet meal. They planned to talk about the next step, possibly visiting West Shore Orphanage together to request any remaining records. Rose led him to a corner table to avoid the curious stares of other staff. The soft glow of candlelight highlighted the subdued seriousness in Redwood's eyes. "Are you sure you're ready to go back to Seattle?" Rose asked, setting down a cup of tea for him. It might stir up a lot of old feelings. Ethan smiled gently. "I've gone over it in my head so many times. It won't be easy, but it's necessary." He paused his gaze. "Warm. If you're willing, I'd love for you to come with me. We can look for any documents or records about Marianne's visit, or sign in. Maybe there's more about my birth father." Rose felt a flutter of nerves. She glanced around, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "I'd like that. I need to see this through too." Indeed, the notion of traveling across the country with a brother she'd only recently discovered was daunting but also exhilarating. She wanted to fully know the story of her mother's life, no matter how painful. Their conversation was interrupted by the abrupt arrival of Marcus, who hovered at the edge of the table, wearing a forced smile. "Mr. Redwood," he addressed Ethan with an air of strained politeness. "I just wanted to apologize for the earlier confusion. We are committed to our VIP guests, if there's anything I can do." Redwood waved a hand to dismiss the tension. "No worries. Marcus Rose has been taking good care of me." Marcus nodded, though his gaze flickered to Rose with a note of wariness. "Good, I'm glad to hear it." He then turned and walked away, leaving an awkward air in his wake. Ethan smirked after Marcus left. "He's been fidgety around me ever since we cleared up that reservation." Mix-up, Rose suppressed a laugh. "He's terrified you'll badmouth the restaurant to your billionaire friends." They shared a light moment, but it was short-lived. As Rose finished up, she noticed a man in a dark suit seated at the bar nursing a cocktail. His gaze was locked on them with an unsettling intensity. Something about his presence felt off his posture. Too stiff, his eyes too intent. Instinctively, Rose looked away, trying to ignore the prickling sensation along her neck. Once Ethan's meal was done, they stepped outside together into the cool night. Streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. Rose exhaled, tension draining. "That was a good dinner," she said. Thanks for letting me talk your ear off about the orphanage plan. Ethan chuckled softly. I'm glad we can face this together. He glanced back at the restaurant, lowering his voice. Did you notice that man at the bar? Rose tensed. Yes. He seemed watchful. Ethan's expression darkened. He's been showing up at places I go to. I first noticed him at my hotel. Thought it was coincidence, but then I saw him again outside a charity event. He's always nearby, never too close, but definitely watching a pulse of alarm shot through Rose. Any idea who he is? No? Ethan admitted. But I suspect it might be someone from the business sector, a competitor, or worse, a corporate spy. This kind of thing isn't entirely new in my line of work. Still, it's unnerving, and now that we're digging into personal matters, I'm worried about how far he might go. Rose's mind raced. The idea that someone was tailing Ethan, possibly leveraging his family secrets for profit or blackmail, was chilling. Are you safe? Have you told the police? He looked uncomfortable. I'm not sure what to report. The man hasn't done anything illegal. He's just there. But I'm looking into hiring private security or an investigator. My main concern is that I don't want our family business. The search for answers about Marianne to be exploited. Rose nodded, adrenaline pulsing. If Ethan was being watched, that could jeopardize not only him, but also Harold, and memories of Marianne's old secrets might be at risk of public exposure or manipulation. We'll be careful, she murmured. Ethan walked Rose to her car, giving her a gentle hug. Good night, I'll call you tomorrow. We'll plan our trip to Seattle. In the meantime, stay alert. If you see anything suspicious, call me. Rose nodded her mind, too frazzled to speak. As she drove home, every headlight in her rearview mirror felt ominous. She couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, half expecting the shadowy figure in the dark suit to appear. The realization sank in that discovering her long-lost brother and unraveling their mother's hidden past could have more serious implications than she had bargained for. As Rose and Ethan prepared for their trip to Seattle, tension at Sullivan's Bounty escalated. Marcus, desperate to please Redwood, kept pressuring Rose to persuade Ethan to host a VIP event at the restaurant. He's an influential man, Marcus insisted one afternoon, cornering Rose near the stockroom. Think about the business opportunities. We could hold a philanthropic dinner. Imagine the publicity if Redwood invites his wealthy associates. Rose bristled. Ethan's here on a personal matter. He's not interested in hosting big events right now. Marcus's face darkened. I'm just saying you have a good rapport with him. If you can encourage him, it'd help the restaurant, maybe help you secure a raise or promotion. Annoyance flared in Rose's chest. I'm not going to exploit my friend, my family for the restaurant's gain. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a smug grin creeping across his face. Family, huh? I knew there was more to this. Care to explain? Realizing her slip, Rose stiffened. He's just someone I've gotten to know. That's all? Marcus studied her, the gears turning in his head. Fine. But keep in mind, I have a duty to the restaurant. If Redwood has a reason to be associated with us, we won't turn it down. Rose quickly retreated, feeling uneasy. She had no intention of revealing her newfound sibling connection to her colleagues. But it was clear Marcus wouldn't let the Redwood angle go so easily. The last thing she wanted was for Ethan's family search to be turned into a public spectacle. That evening after her shift ended, Rose noticed the same man in the dark suit standing across the street. He was leaning against a lamppost, half concealed by shadow. Panic clutched at her chest. She texted Ethan, letting him know, but he didn't reply immediately. Gathering her courage, she marched toward the figure, determined to confront him. But as soon as she approached, he slipped into the crowd, disappearing around a corner. She stood there on the sidewalk. Heart pounding, fear churned inside her. Was he tailing her now? Did he suspect something about Ethan's family search? Or was he some unscrupulous journalist looking for a big story to exploit Redwood's personal past? When she finally got home, she locked her doors and double-checked her windows. Sleep came fitfully, even as the promise of finding more clues about her mother's past in Seattle drew closer. An undercurrent of dread threatened to overshadow the excitement. A week later, Ethan and Rose boarded a flight to Seattle Herald, while Supportive preferred not to travel. He felt these revelations were intense enough without adding the stress of flying across the country. Still, he gave his blessing and asked them to call with updates regularly. Rose noticed how Ethan's demeanor grew more tense as the plane neared Seattle, his eyes flickering with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Upon landing, they rented a car and headed straight to the West Shore Orphanage, located in a historic neighborhood by the waterfront. The building was old, but well-maintained. Red bricks, large windows, a tidy lawn and a playground where children laughed and played. Just stepping onto the grounds made Ethan's shoulders sag with an invisible weight, as though he were confronting the ghosts of his childhood. Inside, they were greeted by a kindly woman named Sister Paula, who had been working at the orphanage for decades. Her eyes widened when Ethan mentioned his name, and they grew somber at the mention of Marianne Parker. Sister Agnes, who handled many adoptions back then, passed away recently. Sister Paula explained, leading them to a small office lined with filing cabinets. "But I'll do my best to help you find any records." Ethan glanced at Rose, and she offered a reassuring nod. Sister Paula pulled out a worn ledger, flipping through pages of handwritten entries. Finally, she paused, squinting at an entry from around the time Ethan was born. "There's a note here about a baby boy left anonymously." The mother's name was never formally recorded, but Sister Agnes mentioned a Marianne Parker who visited. She was looking into adopting him or possibly reclaiming him, but after a few meetings, she stopped coming. Tears threatened to spill from Ethan's eyes. Did she leave a note? A letter? Sister Paula sighed, scanning further. "We do have something in the file. It's sealed, but with your identification and a legal request, I can let you read it." She stepped away to retrieve a small envelope from a locked drawer. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter from Marianne Rose, read over Ethan's shoulder as he silently wept. The letter detailed how Marianne, struggling financially and emotionally, had no choice but to leave her baby at the orphanage. She had come back wanting to adopt him properly once her life stabilized, but was denied because of incomplete paperwork and her uncertain living situation. The heartbreak was palpable in every line. "Please understand, I love him. I would do anything to give him a better life. But right now, I can't even support myself. I will return when I can offer him a safe home. Please forgive me if it takes longer than I hoped." Rose pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting her own tears. Ethan closed his eyes, shoulders trembling. Sister Paula patted his back gently, offering a box of tissues. She must have meant to return, Rose whispered. But then she met Dad, and by the time her situation improved, it might have been too late. "You might have already been adopted." Ethan nodded, voice choked with emotion. "She tried, Rose. She really tried." Sister Paula waited respectfully until they composed themselves. "I'm sorry we don't have more," she said softly, "but perhaps this letter offers some closure. She loved you." "Mr. Redwood?" Ethan sniffed, nodding in gratitude. Thank you, sister. It means the world to me to have proof of her feelings. As they left the orphanage, Rose felt a swirl of profound sadness and relief. At least Ethan now had a tangible link to Marianne's heartbreak and devotion. They stood outside, gazing at the building's weathered facade. She did care, Ethan whispered, looking up at the windows that once housed him as an infant. She just didn't have the resources or the timing to bring me home. Rose wrapped an arm around his shoulder, tears in her eyes. You have your answer. She didn't abandon you lightly. For a moment, they simply stood there, letting the magnitude sink in. Then, with determined resolve, Ethan turned to Rose. Let's visit her grave when we return. I owe her my thanks and my goodbye. Rose nodded, her heart aching. She remembered her mother's grave in a serene cemetery outside Boston, a place she visited every year on the anniversary of Marianne's passing. The idea of bringing Ethan there felt right. It would help him find some measure of closure and also strengthen their bond as siblings. But as they returned to their rental car, a chill ran up Rose's spine. Parked across the street was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, its engine idling. She could have sworn she saw movement behind the glass, the silhouette of someone watching them. Before she could point it out, the car pulled away, disappearing around the corner. Ethan followed her gaze, lips tightening. He's followed me here too, he murmured. This is bigger than just a competitor. Someone's tracking my personal moves. Fear churned in Rose's stomach. If the man in the dark suit, or whoever employed him, was willing to track Ethan across the country, what did they want? She slid into the passenger seat, feeling the rush of adrenaline. Their quest for truth about Marianne was complete in one sense, yet it seemed to have opened new doors of danger. Despite the ominous presence in Seattle, Ethan and Rose managed to stay secure and unseen for the remainder of their trip. When they flew back to Boston, they immediately drove to the cemetery where Marianne rested. It was a crisp morning, the sky painted with gentle hues of pink and gold. Rows of tombstones stretched along neatly kept grass flowers, placed lovingly by visitors to honor lost loved ones. Rose led Ethan to Marianne's gravestone, a simple marker bearing her name, date of birth, and date of passing. She was only 58. Rose said softly, running her fingers across the engraved letters. Ethan kneeled beside the grave, tears slipping down his face. He placed a small bouquet of white lilies on the grass. "Mum," he whispered, voice trembling, "I found you. I found you too late, but I know you loved me. Thank you for giving me life and for trying to come back for me." His shoulders shook as he spoke the words he had likely rehearsed in his mind. For years, Rose knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his back. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude for the mother who had loved her so fiercely and for the brother she had discovered in the most unexpected way. The morning light cast a soft glow over them, and in that intimate moment, it felt as though Marianne's spirit was there, embracing them both. When they finally rose, both felt a tender sense of peace. The complicated journey of uncovering Marianne's secret had reached its emotional climax, yet they both knew they had more life to live, and more memories to create. They emerged from the cemetery with a renewed bond, a bond that transcended bloodlines and secrets forged through shared grief and mutual empathy. Back in the city, Rose was startled to find that her manager Marcus had circulated rumors at Sullivan's Bounty about her special connection to Ethan Redwood. Some staff whispered that Rose was Redwood's girlfriend. Others speculated she was his hidden fiancée. Rose felt anger boil within her. She confronted Marcus privately. "How dare you spread such nonsense?" she demanded, eyes flashing. "Ethan is family." My half-brother Marcus looked taken aback. You were only exploiting gossip for your own gain. He came here looking for private matters, and you turned it into a sideshow." Rose glared. "I will not tolerate this. If you can't respect my personal life, then maybe I need to find a different place to work." Marcus sputtered, trying to backpedal. Now, let's not make rash decisions. You're a valued employee." Rose shook her head. "I'm done dealing with your manipulations. I'll finish my notice if you want, but after that I'm gone." Marcus paled, but knew better than to push. Rose had made up her mind. The relief she felt after quitting was immediate. She realized that working in a restaurant where management saw people as mere stepping stones was no longer an option. She had new horizons to explore. One afternoon, Ethan took Rose out for lunch at another upscale spot in the city, a place he frequented for business meetings. Over plates of freshly prepared sushi, he told her something that made her heart skip a beat. "I've decided to stay in Boston for a while," he said. "At least part-time. I want to be close to you and Harold. Maybe invest in some local businesses, do some philanthropic work here." "That's amazing," Rose said, genuine excitement lighting her face. He smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I'd also like to help you reach your dreams. I know you want to be a journalist. Let me invest in your education or help you get the connections you need. You deserve it." Rose felt tears prick her eyes again. Tears of gratitude this time. "I can't accept too much from you. I want to earn my own way." Ethan nodded, a gentle understanding in his eyes. "I know, just consider me your safety net." Family looks out for each other. She smiled, a sense of belonging wrapping around her like a warm blanket. For the first time since her mother's death, Rose felt as though she wasn't alone in the world. She had her father. Yes, but now she also had a brother, a piece of her mother's love that had been hidden but was finally discovered. In the following weeks, Rose found a better job at a local media company, a stepping stone toward her journalistic ambitions. Ethan used his influence sparingly, introducing her to a few people in the industry, but respecting her desire to stand on her own feet. Meanwhile, Harold welcomed Ethan into the family, with open arms, inviting him over for Sunday dinners, and regaling him with stories of Marianne's kindness and spirit. As for the mysterious figure who had tailed Ethan, a private investigator, eventually traced him back to an enterprise that specialized in digging up personal dirt on high-profile individuals, likely hired by a business rival of Redwood's, hoping to leverage family secrets for blackmail or scandal. But with the truth out in the open among those who mattered, the threat lost its teeth. Ethan's genuine philanthropy and transparent honesty made any potential scandal worthless. The man in the dark suit vanished from their lives, presumably dismissed by his employer for failing to procure valuable information. In the end, the story of how a waitress refused VIP service to a millionaire and then discovered he was her long-lost brother spread quietly among close friends and family rather than in tabloid headlines. It was a private, deeply personal saga. Through drama, heartbreak, and triumphant reconciliation, it united them, and in the quiet moments when Ethan and Rose visited Marianne's grave together, they understood that life's strangest twists often lead to the most heartfelt truths. Love can be lost, buried beneath time and secrets, but it can also resurface stronger than ever, bridging the gulf between strangers who share an unbreakable bond. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey, where a chance encounter at an upscale restaurant led to a life-altering discovery. Rose, a dedicated waitress, never imagined that the millionaire she turned away from VIP service would become the brother she never knew she had. Their quest to uncover Marianne Parker's hidden past took them from Boston to Seattle, navigating shadowy figures, unraveling old letters, and forging a profound sibling bond. If you found this story moving, filled with unexpected twists, heartfelt drama, and the power of family, please give this video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep bringing you tales of love, mystery, and human resilience. Let us know in the comments what part of the story touched you the most. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.